Good day and welcome back to In Conversation with Partners, sponsored by Micro Focus Channel Enablement. Today we have got BoaTech in. It's me and you, big guy. We're carrying on episode 5, and we're touching on quite an important point of security, which is dynamic data masking. And before we even start on this, Boaz, did you ride this weekend?
I did.
Where did you ride this weekend?
I did around the Saddlebrook area into Riversands.
Awesome.
Fun,
awesome. Boaz is a mountain bike rider. He enjoys getting out into the bush, and he usually goes to Northern Farms, which is the most unique area in Johannesburg because it's cheek in jowl with Diepsloot, an informal settlement, and it's just this oasis, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Well protected by the city of Joburg. If you haven't visited it as a person in Johannesburg, please do. Please sponsor them. Go online, book your session, and you'll go and see the most interesting animals and beautiful places. Dynamic data masking. What is that?
Organizations with sensitive data, it's very important that they keep that data away from non-privileged users. So in a nutshell, that's what dynamic data masking is all about, because you want only privileged users to access that data. Earlier on, we spoke about AIM, which is about identity. So with that identity, you put privileges to a role. So a role with more privileges will have access to the mass data, and those with none, they won't have.
Okay. So if we're talking about someone accessing a payroll system, they might be able to see job and position, but they won't be able to see the salary field. Is
Absolutely.
It down to that level?
Absolutely.
And that's dynamic.
That's a good example, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, then actually I'm in for this discussion. I know it. Why do you think it's such a big topic today? Surely this has been around for a long, long time.
I think what's making it to be such a topical discussion, everyone talking about it everywhere, is because of the regulators. I think what the heat that the regulators have brought in, specifically in South Africa, POPIA, Europe, GDPR, CCPA in the US, is one area that regulators are looking at in terms of access to data, who has access to what data and what do they need that access for. So regulators would come in and ask you as an organization, who has access to which data and why do they have access to it? And then the whole discussion around roles and privileges becomes quite important. So organizations are really implementing that because regulators are asking for it.
Okay, so if we think about the POPI journey we've been on from a South African perspective, the data subject, we've got to look after their data, treat it well, and we've got to secure that data. And then you're saying one level beyond that is masking the data. Even in context, it's masked now so that we can't see it. Okay, that makes sense. How does an organization decide what and when to mask?
I think when you're growing in size in terms of your data, it becomes important after having discovered or done a discovery exercise, then you classified it. So the more critical your data is becoming, the more important you need to mask it.
Okay.
So we'll talk about the different types of masking later, but if you look at data, we spoke about structured and unstructured. Those two are equally important because unstructured is one that sprawls more faster than structured. But, structured has more critical or sensitive data that organizations will hold.
Okay. So we're talking about in-system data masking and outside of it. So those Excel spreadsheets that run the world, we're going to be even looking at data masking inside those, and That's pretty good. So when we are looking at what and when to mask, is it in context of the business process or the business objectives? When do you think it becomes important?
I think it's more of a business process because if you are building a system, and again, secure by design, you put processes in place to make sure that any data that's coming into your organization or that's being generated has to be masked because of its priority level or sensitivity level. So it has to be centered around processes.
Okay, cool. That's good. There's a term that's thrown around more than a fish in a marketplace these days, which is data de-identification. Is that the same as data masking? Where's the...
Well, not necessarily.
Okay.
Not necessarily, because I think, we spoke about user identification, now data identification, which is a reverse of de-identification.
Okay.
So they're quite two different subjects, but interlinked. Both have to be taken into context when you looking at the structure of your data and how sensitive and how you manage it.
Okay. Can you mask data that's in transit, or is it only once it's reached? And what I mean by in transit is if we have a business process that's triggered an action in a system, that data is going off. Can we mask the data during that process, or is it only once it's been saved and committed to one area?
I think if you look at the whole topic around dynamic data masking or data masking, you have two subtopics that you have to look at.
Okay.
So you have data encryption, which works mainly around the structured data, your databases, data that is more formal,
Okay.
sitting in an ERP system, for example. And you have tokenization, where you're looking at unstructured data, where you put tokens to safeguard that data.
Okay.
So in talking about encryption, so encryption is more you masking data that is static. And then when you talk about tokenization, is more data that is in motion, which is the difference between the two.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can mask it while it's
Absolutely.
in process. Okay, that's very cool. And the organizations that you are working with, are they seeing it as one exercise, or are they handling this as separate projects in their increasing hold on security on the organization? Where does data masking fit in? Where does encryption fit in? And where does tokenization in their maturity journey?
I think when you look at how you design your data, for example, how you secure your data structures, it is part of, we mentioned earlier on that you look at regulators enforcing organizations to look at how they secure their data and thereof masking and encryption. So it has to be from start to finish, because when you have discovered the data and you have classified it, you just have to go through the journey of masking as you go and encrypting data as you go, because some data becomes critical and then maybe not critical at the initial point and more critical at a later stage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is encryption not safer than data masking?
As I mentioned earlier, encryption is a form of masking.
Okay. So it's layering on your masking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you see them as one. From a BoaTech perspective, the terms can be used almost interchangeably. We've got encryption of data and we've got masking of data.
Absolutely.
Kind of achieving the same thing.
Absolutely.
So when I think about it, I think, did you have those old bathroom windows where the glass was, you could see there were people in there, but you couldn't see what they were up to? Is it that kind of thing?
That's absolutely what it is. So
okay, all right, cool. Now we've masked our data, it's in transit, we're doing a data process. Does that upset the underlying systems? Do we need to do extra coding there? Or how do we get the data to a form we can use it if it was in transit?
I would say it will probably upset or slow down the transactional systems, because it is built as, secured by design, as part of the design.
Hold on, people. Drop the mic. Security by design. I got you to say it. I'm so proud of myself. Okay, let me just segue in. If you haven't seen our other episodes, that is this man's slogan. Security doesn't just happen. We design for security. So dynamic data masking isn't just going to happen. We're going to have it as part of a bigger plan.
Absolutely.
And that's why you work with a security partner during this. So you can put a roadmap together, and that's what BoaTech can do for you with Micro Focus. Okay, pick up the mic. Let's carry on. We're doing it by design.
Yeah, so you want to do it by design from scratch so that you don't catch it later and find out that you need to mask the data or encrypt the data. If you secure by design, you would have discovered, you have classified, then you know where do you start with your masking. The most critical data gets masked. And you define between your structured and unstructured, and you know where to put encryption and you know where to put tokenization.
Okay, because we are going to get diminishing returns. There's going to be a trade-off somewhere. So is my end user going to suffer because we're layering all of the security on? Are response times going to be affected?
Not that much. The system, when I think that's where the secure by design comes in, because when you've secured by design and you implement tokenization or encryption, in broader terms, masking, that won't affect any performance of the application, therefore users suffering.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we're still keeping the user somewhere in mind and the customer that we're dealing with. Okay, that's very good. Would you suggest that there's pre-work or cleanup that we need to do before we implement dynamic data masking? We know in previous episodes we've spoken about data classification, organization. We've obviously spoken about POPI readiness. So if we're assuming all things being equal, we understand the data we're collecting, storing, and for what purpose. Is there anything else we need to do either as IT or as the business in order to make this effective?
Absolutely. I think, if you look at or you remember in a couple of years ago, we used to call this data cleansing.
Okay.
Which is purely preparing the environment to adhere to certain requirements that will make performance better. So that data cleansing now has evolved as data discovery, data classification. We're just breaking it down and preparing the environment and knowing who the users and who has access to what data. And that is, in effect, the pre-work that needs to be done before you implement data masking.
Okay, yeah. That's very clever. I see a lot of customers that do this as a once-off, this data cleansing. And if we assume that there's upwards of a 20% change in data every year, in 5 years, your data is completely new. And if you're not doing data cleansing on a regular basis, all you're doing is making a headache for your security team or yourself. So I really think there was wisdom there. We need to be looking at this data cleansing quite regularly. Are there any tools that make getting to this level of security easier that are out there for organizations?
Absolutely. I think, talk to us. Together with Micro Focus, we have tools ready to assist you to make sure that your data can be cleansed if you understand the cleansing better than the discovery and classification.
Okay.
So tools are there. We can assist you at any time.
Awesome. I'm really glad about this. I know dynamic data masking might seem like such a small thing, but from a reputation management perspective, if that data gets out there, that can be terrible. And as in my previous life, ERP projects, just giving access to the development team doesn't protect your data very much. So if I think about things we used to do and access that we used to have, it's bordering on criminal, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Because I think obviously with POPI coming into effect, there are repercussions for not meeting certain requirements of the POPI Act. So it's very important. I think, as an accounting or information officer, you are liable and there could be a jail time. So that is, how stringent this regulatory framework is and how serious we need to take it and take into consideration securing our environment from the onset and building it upwards with more security in mind, knowing what's out there in the market, the changes that are happening, being aware of, we spoke about ransomware earlier on, but other attacks that are out there.
Awesome. So if you want to spend time in the big house because your security has been compromised and it was your fault, don't take any of what Boaz is saying seriously. If, however, You want to stay on this side of jail. You want to keep your users covered. You want to keep your employees happy. And you want to keep your customer at the forefront. Security by design is what BoaTech is talking around and what we need to get in place. Dynamic data masking, just taking it to the next level. Thank you again for sharing with us. Thank you for spending time with us, and keep riding that bicycle.
Thank you, Daniel.
From my side, Daniel Robus, your Micro Focus host, I'd like to say thank you for joining us for episode 5, Dynamic Data Masking.